3 different feathers in 3 different ways. So just adding a bit more of the highlight here, and that way you go and you can get it back to that state of white paper. So I'm not even applying any pencil. A few weeks ago I went to the park with my friend and she helped me to pick some feathers. So today's video we will be drawing 3 different feathers in 3 different ways. We will do a charcoal, a pencil and a pen drawing. Here are the feathers that I was talking about. See, they all very different, and I'm gonna have to choose some of them for the drawings. Okay, so I have chosen these 3 feathers. I am going to maybe choose this one for my pencil drawing, and then this one for charcoal. So we'll just have a look as it goes along. I'll start with this one. So to start working on a feather, what I would like to do first is to put that line in the center as a central line. Okay, so we've got this. Whoops, it's getting caught. Okay, there. So to put this line as a central line. And then we can start building the shape of the feather up. So I'm not looking at all these individual lines. I only start drawing the overall shape. And then all these fluffy bits here, we're going to do them a bit later. And I will show you how to do that as well. Now, I'm not sure if it looks the same for you guys as it does for me, just because my board is upright a little bit. So my viewpoint to this is a bit different because you guys are looking from the top and I'm looking from the side. Okay, so I'm going to start with making marks. You see how I'm actually leaving quite a bit of space in between, and I will show you why we're doing this. So I'm just working on this part, the part where the feather, I don't know what these things are called, feather lines, I'm not sure. There would probably be a special scientific name for it. But English is my second language, so I struggle with those kind of terms. Okay, and now I'm going to shade this because I can see that it's quite a bit darker than the rest of the feather. You see, now that I've given it the direction, I can follow along with those lines and shade. You can do this with any other object or pattern. If there is a natural pattern that goes one way or another, you can follow that direction when you're shading. When we get to the videos where I will be teaching you how to draw different animals, we would need to go over the fur, and the same thing would apply there. Now I'm starting to add a little bit more direction by going just a bit harder. And shading some things a little bit stronger too. Now I'm going to do a bit of this fluff. It will be quite hard to do this properly without the use of a smudge stick. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go for this smudge stick and very softly blend it. And create a really soft but also very gentle sort of a look. You can also use your smudge stick to create some marks. And now I will actually go back in with a really dark pencil, and that part, to me, it looks really contrasted against the white. So I'm going to just add a bit more shadow, and same here, this bit is quite dark on this feather. It's quite interesting because some feathers, you know, this line in the middle, that vein, is usually lighter than the feather, and in some feathers it's quite a bit darker than the rest of the feather. If any of you are specialists in birds or feathers, please let me know why that is. Is that the species of the bird? Is that something else that does that? Giving a little bit more definition to this fluffy bit. And going back for more smudging. We can leave it at this if you're happy with the shade, but I'll go just a little bit deeper and create some more contrast. That line is almost perfectly cut. There's no separation. with a little bit of that sort of a torn look. And now these are some areas that I would like to softly smudge. Just to make it a little bit more uniform. Okay. I think this feather is kind of done. Let's add a little bit of shadow as well. Some light shadow there and there. And also and now let's add just a tiny bit of the highlight. So I'm using a putty rubber here. If you would like to find out more about graphite materials and different supplies you can use with it, I do have a video on that, so make sure you watch that. It's very helpful, especially if you want to go and purchase new supplies and you're not sure, do you need this, do you need that? Because there's so much stuff in the shop usually, and believe me, you don't need all of that stuff. You can spend thousands of dollars in the art shops. If you don't know what you're buying. Okay. So just adding a bit more of the highlight there as well. Yeah, I'm quite happy with it. I know the real feather is a bit darker, but I quite like that look. Maybe if I give it a little bit more of a smudge. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so thank you, little feather. You served more than your purpose. First you served the bird, and now you served us on YouTube. Now I've got this little feather, and I think I would work on this one with a pen. And before we start, I would suggest to sketch it out with a pencil first. So if you're working on this, I'll hold it up like so. If you're working on this, make sure that you do the same thing. You don't need to use mechanical pencil. You can just use any normal usual pencil, anything you've got on hand. The reason why I would like to use the pencil first is because we can erase the pencil if I decide to change the shape, size or placement of it, but if I start with a pen, then I will not be able to do that. So I'm just going to very gently mark. So again, doing the same thing as we did here with a pencil, we are marking that vein through the main little branch, and then just marking the main sort of a shape. And then those fluffy little bits here. And also I want to mark this sort of a lighter spot. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get it with just using an ink pen, but I will try either way. Okay, so I've got a black pen. I hope it's not gonna run out on me, because I think it is running out. And I'm going to mark it's a very inky pen, this one. So you can see how it's leaving quite a bit of ink on the paper. And let's start. Again, I'm doing a very similar thing. What I did here, I am just marking through some of the lines. Adding more and more lines. Yeah, I have a feeling I won't be able to bring in those brown spots without making this really dark. Deepening that little ridge there. It's quite funny because drawing this is making me think of the times when we used to use feathers and ink to write. And now we're drawing feathers with ink. I really want to fill these things out. Because they're sort of breaking that whole thing a bit. Okay, now let's get to this part. And let's try and do the really fluffy bits, which will be quite hard to do with a pen. But if we go really gently, we might be able to achieve that sort of a look. Okay, and some more on the other side. and this part is transparent in the feather. Okay, so I think this can be quite good. We can probably leave it at that. And you can see in comparison to this feather, it actually was quite quick to do this one. So let's see what's going to happen when we do this feather with charcoal pencils. Okay, so now I'll leave this here and get my charcoal pencil. Before I go on with charcoal, as always, I will do a very quick sketch with pencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this and then the overall shape as well, and same on this side. More like this, I think, and then we've got the little tiny bits here. So let's start. So this is charcoal pencil on white paper. See, completely different sound. This vein is quite dark on this one, and it only becomes lighter when it reaches this area, so I'm just going to leave this for now. This pencil is a bit crumbly for some reason. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to get my smudging stick for charcoals and pastels, and I'm going to create that sort of a, you see how you've got this color, even though it's quite dark and it's got a lot of pigment in it, but it's still really soft. There's some kind of a haziness to it, especially on these sides here and here, because I think it's semi-transparent perhaps, or not sure why, but this is the effect that we want to try and replicate as well. And we can kind of get a similar effect by smudging. You see, now I can just grab some charcoal from here and use that on the tip of my smudge stick to create that fluffy, feathery effect. Now I want to go back in with this. Now I'm going to go back in again with my smudge sticks for charcoal, but this time I'm not going to be smudging in any direction. I'm going to keep my movements of my hands along with the movements of the charcoal that I've created. These lines that I've created here, yes, I'm just going along. And same on this side. And then again, I'm going to pick up my charcoal, and now I'm just going to rework the edge a bit, and same on that side as well. And then again with a smudge stick. So it's just going back and forth until I create the shade that I like, or that I'm happy with. I think it's a bit too defined here, so I'll just give it a good smudge to soften it. And also, if we look at this, I think closer to the stem, you know, closer to that line, we've got darker areas, so I am going to just add a little bit of that shade on the side, and same on the other side. Okay, now I'm going to grab my petty rubber that is specifically for charcoal drawing. You do want to keep charcoal and graphite things separate, because charcoal is just so much smudgier. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. maybe I'll just add a little bit of the lighter areas here. And remember, it's really hard to completely erase your charcoal, but it is always possible to lighten it up at least 1 or 2 shades lighter. And this will help us create even more definition and even more, give more reflections on this black feather. Okay, so I think this feather is almost finished. There is one more detail, and it's this little bit. Here. Okay, and now the very last thing. I think I want to just make it even darker. So just darken some areas, and maybe up here, because I want this area to be lighter. So to make this lighter, I'm just going to darken this. And leave this area a little bit lighter. And now you can see just how different these 3 feathers turned out. The pencil one, the pen one, and the charcoal one. You get a very different feel, whereas with the pencil one you can get into a whole lot of details, make it as light as you'd like. With the pen, you've got almost like a shadow, you know, you've got that black and white contrast going on, where it's quite strong. Probably would be perfect if someone wanted to do a print of it somewhere or something like that. And then we've got the charcoal one, where it's much easier to smudge and blend, but the feather itself looks much heavier and much stronger compared to, say, like even these two, especially this one. So remember, whatever material that you choose to use will affect your final result, no matter of your time spent on it, your skill. This will definitely influence your work. So this is quite a good tutorial where you can clearly see the 3 different results that we could get with this. Hey guys, in this tutorial I would like to talk about different ways that you can draw and concentrate on specific ways of mark making, different styles that you can create with your pencil and your rubber. So again, we're only covering graphite, but feel free to use some of these techniques for other materials like pen or ink or charcoal and so on. And I would like to start with different things that can affect your value. One of these would be, of course, how soft your pencil is or how hard it is, but another one is pressure. So say this is a 2B pencil, and I'm going to start feather light, and then as I go along I'm going to be applying more pressure and more pressure and more pressure. And here's the strongest out press. I think if I press harder I'll just break the pencil lead. So this is 2B. Now I'm gonna go with the 5B again, really light. So this is 5B, and now I'll do same thing with a 9B. So this is 9B. So you can see how even though you're using the same pencil, you can still achieve a really soft look, a really light look, or you can achieve a really dark, very strong shaded look. Cross-hatching is quite an old technique. It was used in many different ways throughout history for etching and engraving, drawing, and many other things. So the main thing about cross-hatching is that you're using lines, and these lines sort of cross over a little bit. When I was a student, art student in Moscow, this was one of the first and main techniques that we would have to work on for our drawing skill classes. Something we would be marked on. So I'm starting off with quite a neutral, sort of not too dark, not too light shading. And then by crossing over, I'm building up the intensity of the value to the desired effect. So I've been using 4B pencil, and now I'm gonna go for something a little bit harder. 4H is too hard. I'm gonna go for the F. The reason why I've taken a harder pencil now is because I want to go really light around the area of the highlight and not to go too strong. And now I'm going back to the 4B. I made a video about different types of pencils and their differences, and I will link it down below so you can watch it if you haven't done so until now. The 5B pencil. If you love doing cross-hatching, or if this is something you think of getting into, one thing you need to remember is that you always need to keep your pencils sharp. And your lines should always cross and go in different directions. Now that I've got majority of my shadows down, I'm going to go and sort of tweak it a bit. make sure that I've got the right shape. And then I've got back to my harder pencil. So as you already have probably realized, the light is falling from this direction. So it's casting a shadow on the opposite side. I will do a separate tutorial on how to observe light and shadow. But in this one, I'll just keep it to the technical side of mark making. Okay, now I'm going to go for even a darker one. I'll go for 8B. And go over the really, really dark patches. Going for a harder pencil because that one's too dark for this area. And now perfecting and finishing off edges and little bits and pieces. Okay, now you can also tidy things up with using your rubbers. I'm using a petty rubber for this one, but you can use any old rubber. If you would like to find out more about rubbers you can use while working with graphite, again, I will put a link down below for my tutorial about graphite materials. So there we go. So this is the cross-hatching technique for creating shadow and light. So as you can see, the main thing here is using lines, right? I'm not smudging them, nothing like that, but using them in a crisscross fashion and creating shading by overlaying these lines. Now this technique is kind of like cross-hatching, but cross-hatching you go across, to create your shades. Now with this one you only use lines going in one direction. So when you are creating this technique, make sure that you only create lines in one direction, because as soon as you cross them, you already crossed into cross-hatching. Now I'm going to actually take one of these pencils. So the way to create shading is by making your lines darker. So by using softer pencils or by pressing hard. And another way you can create that darker effect is by inlaying more lines between the other lines. So see, I'm still going in that same direction. I'm going over these previous lines, getting them darker and also going in between them. Some people use very short strokes and just go like this. You can do that as well. That can be quite fun. Just make sure that they all go in the same direction. So just remember, if you need things to be darker, you can use more pressure on your pencil. I personally prefer to use cross-hatching because I think it helps to describe the shape a bit better. But I guess if you're like a comic book artist or you just want to create that specific look of that stretchiness of everything going in one direction, then this is definitely for you. Also, if you are creating drawings with movement, like you want to portray speed, someone is running or something like this, doing this technique can really help in achieving that result. And if that's what you want to do, you might as well practice on things like still life first. In some areas shadows become sharper, and in other areas they have a really soft, almost blurred edge. That's why really whenever you're drawing, ideally, especially when you're learning, ideally you would be drawing either from life or from a photograph. But again, if you'd like me to do a separate video on that, please let me know in the comments. Now there is also another finer technique of etching and usually used with the ink pen. That's when these lines are so precise that they never even get together like this. See, this is getting a little bit smudgy. You can still see the direction, but there are so many lines that they're almost forming this one block. But as I said, there's another technique, and it's usually done with the ink pen. Again, if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll be able to make a separate tutorial on that as well. There's so many things that I'd like to share with you guys. I just don't know what's the next one will be. So please let me know. Alright, and now I'm going to go back in with this putty rubber. And create a stronger highlight. Maybe just a tiny bit lighter down there. No, it's actually too light now. I'm gonna go over this just a little bit. So there you go. So this is hatching technique of mark making. Rendering, where you're just going back and forth without any kind of structure to your mark making. So only focusing on the shade, only focusing on what's darker, what's lighter, and using your rubber to not just tidy up, but to also create marks. Now I'm using graphite pencil, which is just plain graphite. You can use your normal pencils. For that too, and achieves similar effect, but not the same. As you can see, this is a much quicker technique, but it's probably not as precise. I find that this technique is very popular with people who are just starting up and they did not have any specific instructional education, just want to do a bit of doodling, drawing. This is usually the technique that they go for. So as you can see, to create the highlight, I'm going back in there with my rubbers. So there we go. So you can see how much quicker this one is. The problem with graphite is that at certain angles it becomes shiny and it becomes quite hard to see. There you go. That's just sort of a back and forth rendering without using any structure or anything like this, just by doing that kind of a movement. I will be using smudging materials to create a really smooth kind of a finish. This kind of technique is usually used by artists who focus on photorealism or want to create that sort of a perfect finish without any visible pencil markings. So for this technique, what you really want to do is create a reasonably smooth shading to start with, just so that it will help you smudge things later. And now it's time to smudge. Now, mistakenly, people think that when you use smudging techniques, things only can be done in a really soft way. In reality, you can shade it in as dark as you want and still create a soft look by layering like this. So see how I'm smudging in between the layers and then deciding if I need to add more graphite in certain areas. So I'm trying to go quite smooth and try not to create too many harsh marks, so that it's easier to blend them afterwards. You also have a choice of completely smudging things, where you can't even see pencil marks at all, or you can go for just a softly blended look where you can still see that it's a pencil drawing. Whenever you're drawing, especially if it's not a very large piece, always make sure that you position yourself in the way that you can turn your paper around, because it helps a lot. I also have some tutorials on how to use your arm and your wrist when you're drawing in a specific way to help you with your shapes, and that's already available on Patreon. Again, I will leave a link down below. So you can go and just for $8 a month you can watch all the extra videos on very tricky parts of the techniques that I'm showing you here, to really go deep into specific ways of drawing. I also give you special exercises you can do as well to improve your feel for shades or other technical difficulties that you may come across if you're learning how to draw. So what I'm doing here is I'm tidying it up a little bit, and I'm getting rid of all of these lines that I no longer need. And I'm also using putty rubber to lift a little bit of graphite off some of the areas that I want to be just a little bit lighter than they are at the moment. So it's this little bit here. Now this light is the reflection of the light that falls down and then bounces back. If you would like for me to make a video specifically on these little bits and pieces, please comment down below, and then I will know that there is an interest in a specific topic. And you can see how some techniques may take a little bit more time, others are really quick. And now I can go back in with no pencil. Now this is still 4B, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to grab a 9B pencil to really create that depth. I'm using it in a really soft way, again, just to make it easier for the blending when the time comes to it. This little bit there would be the darkest shadow that you would have. And making it a tiny bit darker through here. And back for blending. And now I'm going to go and highlight again. In fact, whenever you're drawing anything, not necessarily smudging technique or any technique, especially if it's a drawing that'll take you a while to complete, at the end always go over your highlights with the rubber, because while you're working, unknowingly you will be smudging it a little bit, and that way you go and you can get it back to that state of white paper. For extra contrast. So this is the smudging technique, and I've used the smudging tool. For more smudging tools and things like that, I will leave a link down below under the video. Another technique I wanted to show you, which again I rarely use, and that's sort of like stippling or sort of like scribbling techniques, where rather than using any particular lines in any order or softly blending things, you sort of just go and create a funny kind of a texture like this by creating this kind of a mark making. Again, it can be really interesting to use with a pen as well, ink pens. I think it can actually look really beautiful with ink pens. I've done few classes with my students on that. And what you can also achieve with this is the type of a texture that it can give you. Because remember, whenever you're making lines visible, not only are you creating shading, you're also creating a specific texture that an onlooker or a viewer, whoever sees your work, will be sort of making connections with. So for example, if you're working on the landscape, for instance, and you are creating tree bark or maybe some kind of a texture that you might want to, maybe little rocks or something like this, little pebbles in the distance. So this can be quite a good descriptive technique as well. Other than that, it can be used for even things like still life, a little bit unusual, but still can be used for that. So small little squiggly lines. So I'm using 5B pencil. Now I'm gonna go for a 2B pencil. And as you layer it over and over, it becomes more and more uniform. It is up to you how soft and how uniform you want it to be. If you are in for that specific texture, then I'd suggest to make it a little bit more visible and a little bit more expressive. Now I'm going to go into the cast shadow, or falling shadow as I like to call it. It's the shadow that's created by the object when it blocks the light. Each pencil. I'll go back to the softer one. 2B. Okay, now it's time to add a little bit more of a highlight. Maybe lift just a little bit of a graphite from the soft light. And I'm actually going to go with this rubber to create a really bright highlight. So there you go. There's your scribbling or scrambling, stippling, whatever you want to call it, technique. Cross stippling, I guess, since there are little dots. Hey guys, I'm glad that you get to see this how to draw a cherry with pencil tutorial, because I think it may help you with your drawing skill. It's a cherry season at the moment over here, and I thought, why don't I choose a cherry for my subject matter? This will be another follow along tutorial, so feel free to join me and draw along. I will be using graphite materials and some smudging tools. Okay, so let's start. First, we need to look at the objects and assess what kind of shape they remind you of. Okay, so the simple geometric shape would be either a circle for this one, or you can go with an oval. I have a separate video on how to start sketching any object with the use of simple geometric shapes. So please make sure you go and watch that one if you haven't seen that until now. I also have a video on Patreon about how to observe objects, which can also be really helpful. So remember, you can always go there, support me on Patreon, and watch extra videos. So for this one, I'm going to use somewhat round shapes. Oh, they're not circles, they're not ovals, so something in between, rounded ovals. And so this would be our first step. Next is, let's mark our lines. Little tails. And remember, at this stage, make sure that you press very lightly on your pencil, because we will be doing a lot of changes. A lot of lines would have to come off, and some of them should not really be visible at the later stages of your drawing project. So now what I'm doing is shaping my simple geometric form to more fit with the shape of my object, which is cherry. So I'm adding a little bit of extra flash there, extra there. And just a little bit more on the bottom there. And of course the little stick, the tail, whatever it is called, would be sitting here. So now we've got the overall shape sketched. Next, I am going to go in with an eraser and remove the structure lines that really helped us in the first place, but we don't need them anymore. So we're getting rid of them. Okay, next we're going to mark the shadows, again in a very soft, sketchy way. I think the stick actually goes more that way. There. So remember, whenever you're drawing, the more your drawing will progress, the more you would need to alter things and change them around a little bit. Okay, so now going to the shadows. So if we very carefully observe the object, you would see that some parts of the object are touching the table, the background, and so everywhere where the object is closer to the background, the shadow meets the actual object, And the further away the object is, the more space that you see between the object and the shadow. Also, if you pay attention, you'll be able to see that the further away the shadow is, the softer it is, and the closer the shadow is to the object, the darker it usually gets. And it's usually like this for most of the still life settings you would find, but I mean, there are always exceptions for every rule. So depending on what kind of light you've got. Now for this one, I used just a light from the window. You can probably even see it in the reflection. So we've got a very natural highlight, shadow happening here. And you see for this cherry, you can't see the shadow because it is quite high up. It's lifted up, you know, the tail is going up into the ear. So there is so much space between that stick and the table is that you pretty much, it almost disappears. It probably is there, like if I did like exaggerated the contrast on the photograph, you probably will be able to notice something, but it's not there now, so we're not going to bother with it. And then the shadows, so I've only marked the really strong shadows, and then we will be able to later add them in there. Okay, so far I've been using a 2B pencil. I do like to start with something in the middle. I wouldn't go any harder than HB, but 2B, 4B are really good pencils for just starting your sketch out. Next, I'm going to look at the photograph and I'm going to assess the darkest areas on the still life. And in this picture, I can see that because cherries are so ripe and so dark, cherries themselves bring in the darkest hue into the whole composition. So I'll start with these, and because the background is white, even though the falling shadows are quite dark, you would be able to see that they're still not as dark as the cherry itself, just because of the actual color contrast between these two surfaces. So one of the darkest areas on the cherry is this part of the shadow. So I'm just going to fill it in. So now I'm using a 9B pencil, so it's pretty dark. Some more there. In some compositions like this one, it is beneficial to start with the darkest color because you know this is the darkest that your pencil can go, and you will use that as a base for you to compare all the other shades. Okay, so this is already semi dark, and also because highlights here are quite strong and well, they're not very sharp, but because cherries are quite shiny, you do get reasonably straightforward outlines almost. Let's go on to the next one. So with the next one again, we see that the darkest areas are somewhere here. There's some over there, we'll get that later. And really softly go over the brightest spot or spots. in this other cherry. Now if we look closer at the photograph and pay a little bit more attention, you'll be able to see that cherries are actually reflecting each other as well, and that creates another dark spot. So if you look very carefully at this area here, you will be able to see that it's really dark because this cherry is reflecting in this one, and as they are the darkest objects in this composition, that is very noticeable. Same in this one as well. Now, because we're working in black and white, we don't really worry about the color. We just want to get the right shade. So we don't need to worry about that. But if we were working with color and these were different colors, so one of them would have been blue, the other one yellow, you would actually see a little bit of that color cross over from one to another. So if you're painting, make sure you pay attention to that too. Now this one, I'm not going with cross hatching or anything like this because I'm going to use my smudging tools to blend the colors, just to keep it a bit different from my previous tutorial. And at the moment I'm just looking at the cherries. Okay, I think now this is time to start blending, and I'm going with the small blending stick, and I'm going to just really softly and the same thing on the other one. Okay, now going back in with more pencil. By the way, if you're interested to find out about different smudging tools, erasers and things like that, there is another video for that, and if you haven't seen it, I do suggest you watch it, and I will leave all the links down below. So this is our darkest spot. This area is a little bit lighter, but we'll be able to pick some of the graphite off the paper with the kneaded rubber a little bit later on. At the moment I just want to focus on creating these really strong, rich shadows. So this area here is almost as dark as that, so I'm going in full strength with my pencil. Now let's go for the other one. Okay, so while I'm working on the cherries, I'm just focusing on these two objects, but I think now it's time to start looking at the falling shadows as well, or I think they're called cast shadows, but I call them falling shadows just because this is how I was taught with this terminology. So I'm just going to softly go over the darkest areas. And remember, whenever you're drawing anything, not just this picture, but anything, always compare. So you've got the darkest part, so always compare your darkest shade with the shade that you're working on. Is it just as dark? Is it half as dark? Is it darker? You know, so that way you are not going to go too far from the real thing. If you're unsure, always leave it just a little bit lighter, because it's easier to sort of go back in with a pencil and add more shade than to remove it. It's not as bad with pencil, with graphite, but then say if you're working with charcoal and things like that, it can be a bit more difficult. So it's quite soft there, I'll just leave it as it is. And a bit darker in this area. And now I'm going to go for the larger smudge stick, just because I want to smudge things a little bit more uniform and just a bit more blended. And same with the falling shadows. So here, same thing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to really softly bring the graphite and smudge it just tiny little bit more over this way where these really soft shadows are. So I'm not even applying any pencil, not creating any pencil marks. I'm just blending whatever is there through onto the white of the paper, and you can see just how soft of the effect that you can create like this. Okay, same thing here with the other cherry. And just really softly again, blending it outwards. And then there's all that softness there. And remember, when you're smudging, when you're using smudging sticks or other smudging tools that I talked about in one of the previous tutorials, where I talk about graphite materials, remember, it's not how hard you press, but it's more how many times you go over. That way you will get a really soft look. See, also here I'm already starting to use circular motions to really blend it out, and later on I'll be able to add some more graphite if I need to. I'm glad you're joining me today, because today I will show you how to draw this with soft pastels. I already have a video on soft pastels on Patreon, so if you would like to, you can go and support me there and watch the extra videos. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you press the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. It's extremely hard to get rid of charcoals or soft pastels as they smear everywhere. So first I would like to sketch out my overall shape with the graphite pencil, and then we will go on to using color. For this object, and if you would like to see a video on how to start drawing objects where I explain different ways of looking at different simplified shapes, please do so. I will leave a link down below. Okay, so I would like to start with this a little bit there. So now that is going to set a specific size to the banana. Now I'm going to create a curve, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to almost like do a central line that's going through a banana to help me with the shape a little bit. Next, I'm going to draw almost like a crescent to show the shape of the banana. And now I'm going to start altering the shape to suit the actual object that I'm drawing. Okay, so now what do I need to do here? And at this stage you can go a little bit harder with your pencil. Just remember, try not to make really thick, strong lines, because, you know, as you follow along with this, you will be able to see that sometimes it can be quite hard to apply pastel or charcoal onto graphite. So you want to, you know, I mean, you want them to be visible, but you want to keep them quite soft as well. I guess we could always soften them up with a rubber later. So the banana is wider at the top. I'm going to just carry on. We've got that little bit there at the end. Okay, so now we've got an approximate shape of the banana there, so almost like a sketched outline. Now what I would like to do is I would like to look a little bit closer at the shape and mark, you know, these ridges that you get on the banana, and you can see them because of the highlight on one side and the shadow on the other. See, there's another big one there, but we can't really see it on that side. Okay, so I'm going to remove the central line that I don't need anymore, and I am going to draw these ridges in. One there, and then that strong one on the bottom. Right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is my approximate sketch of the shape. I think it has enough information for me to start using the pastels, but what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to try and completely erase the lines that I don't need, lines that we needed for structuring. And also what I'm going to do now is I'm going to soften the lines that are there that we do need, but we don't really need them that strong. It's more visible in real life than it is through the lens. Okay, so I think this should be quite good. Okay, so what am I going to do next is I'm going to have the basic colors. Now I do have a tutorial on charcoal where I explain use of different papers and so on YouTube, so you can go and have a look at that one as well. I will leave a link down below. But this is a gray paper, so we have to take into consideration, whenever we're using a different color paper, we always have to take into consideration the color of the ground that you're working on. So this is gray. We already have that color built into our work. If we want to change it in any way, we need to add another color on top of it. So whether it's darker, whether it's lighter, whether it's another color. But if we like this shade, then we just leave it as it is. So let's start. I'm going to go for a sort of a warmer yellow. It does have quite a bit of transfer from other colors as well. But I'm not going to completely cover everything. I'm just going to add a little bit of that color through. At this stage, and then later on, if I need to, I can always add more. Okay, now I'm going to go for a lighter yellow and start applying it on the areas that are a little bit lighter. See how this yellow is just so much more zingy than the other one. Actually, I'll move this here so that it's a bit easier. Okay, next I am going to add a little bit of green. And you see how at this stage I'm not really blending anything just yet. I want to deposit some of the color on there so that then as we're blending, we can bring in more colors and more definition. Another color that I want to start adding as well is this ochre color. There's quite a bit of it here, I think, on the banana. And tiny little bit of brown. And you see, because I need very little of it at this stage, and I'm just adding a little bit, because then when I do blend the two colors in, it's going to cross, you know, and mix and create that shade that I'm actually looking for. And remember, you can always add more color later on, but it's much harder to remove it with pastels. And I'm going to do a very similar thing with black, but black I'm pretty much just going to very, very gently dot through, and a little bit there, actually with a bit of brown as well. Okay, right, So now what I'm going to do is I can, especially at this stage, I can start smudging it with my fingers. Okay, so in the beginning, before we get into any kind of detail, and you see how the color changes? After a good smudge. Okay, so then there's that ridge now that's appearing on the banana. Would need to make that one a little bit darker. So see, I know it's very quick to work with these, but we already are getting a bit of shape coming through, the 3D shape. Now next I am going to add even more color. The one thing to remember as well is that because they transfer so much, the colors can actually look different at times. Like, for example, this is orange, but it sort of looks like it's harsh brown or something like that. So just remember, because of that transfer, if you want to, you can always grab a paper towel or a tissue and very gently just give it a cleanse, and then you can see, you know, the color appearing, the true color. Okay, so let's carry on. So I'm going to add some more color. Okay, so now I'm going to carry on doing these little bits. My camera turned off, so I've missed but just a tiny little bit. I've started going on these marks. Okay, so I'm still carrying on the same stuff. So just a little one there. So as I was saying before, I'm not going to do them exactly as they are on the photograph, but it is important to put some markings in, because then you're giving the stage of ripeness of the banana. You know, because it changes its appearance as it ripens. Okay, so I'll add a little bit of just there, tiny bit there, a few spots, a bit more. Okay, and now I'm going to go into the black, and I'm going to go over some of the darker spots and darker areas, like the one here at the tip, and just a bit darker there. Some of these spots would be darker, so I'm going to go over with a little bit of black, or maybe have like a brown spot with a black spot in the middle of the brown one. And let's not forget about the tip as well, where we can see quite a bit of darkness. Okay, now what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to take a brush and I'm going to smudge some of the areas with a brush, because as you can see, some of these areas are just a little too delicate for me to just go in with my fingers. So I'm going to just really softly smudge this a little bit and bring in a little bit of darkness in there. Just grabbing it from here and applying it there, and smudging it here too. I think you probably already noticed just how much quicker it is to work with charcoals and pastels, soft pastels, say compared to pencil or color pencils. Now another thing, when you are applying color, you can either go in and just apply it, as we did before, or another thing, if you need just a little bit, you can even just pick some color up with a brush. See, we've got a tiny bit of green, and then apply it on, almost kind of as if you were painting. Now, there are also, even though it doesn't look like, but there are also some spots that have green on the actual banana as well. So there's a bit of green in there, just very little, but it is there. Okay, and maybe a little bit of lighter green. This sort of a yellowy green that I'm actually going to add in as is. Okay, so now we also, even though the banana itself is not finished, we're going to come back to it. I would like to start working on the falling shadow as well, because that will create that needed contrast for us to judge whether the colors are right or not right. Now for that, I'm going to use a little bit of black. Over there, actually, I'll go for darker as well. And the shadow gets deeper and a bit further out on the side. Okay, now I'm gonna go in with my fingers again. You can see the color of them. And smudge. So remember, whenever you're smudging, if you are rubbing it in the circular motions, you are dissolving the color all the way through. If you are using smudging movements in one direction, you are bringing that direction and it will still be visible. Even if you can't really see the marks, you will still be able to notice that movement. Now I'm also going to add just a tiny little bit of dark, sort of a bluey green, just because that shadow is slightly cool, but it's not blue, but it does have a bit of that cool shade going through it. And let's smudge this bit as well. I'm also going to use a charcoal pencil. You can also get pastel pencils as well, where it's pretty much the same thing. You get your pastel in the shape of a pencil, where that would give you more control and more, you'd be able to work on the details more. So I'm going to get in that little bit there, where the shadow meets the skin of the banana. So that shadow there gets just a tiny bit darker when it comes closer to the banana, and kind of almost provides us that really nice crisp edge, which is quite hard to achieve when you got your fingers in there. So I'm pretty much going to use this just a little bit for the definition. And remember, if you want to find out more about charcoals, I do have a tutorial that you can have a look, that you can watch. So now I'm really getting into that contrast and creating that darker shade. When you are working realistically on a flat surface, whether you're painting or drawing, the only thing that you can rely on to create that 3D illusion is light and shadow. You don't really have much else. I mean, you've got the direction of your marks and things like that, but they're nowhere near as important as the light and the shadow. Okay, now let's have a look what's going on up here. I need to give this a bit of a smudge as well. And now let's get onto some shadows that are core shadows, the shadows that are on the object itself. No, we don't have shadows there. Really softly. I'm barely touching the paper. It's like feather strokes. Because I really don't want to leave any deep color. Just going really softly. Going back into some marks. Here you can press a little bit harder. Same here and here. Okay, now it's really getting there. The more we work on it, the more we can see the shape. Now I'm using a smudge stick to soften the charcoal a little bit. The reason why I'm using a smudge stick, I can use my fingers here, but the reason why I'm using the smudge stick is because you see that line there, I want it to be reasonably crisp. So just very carefully. And I want to blend this really well as well, because it's really soft. I do have some lines showing, so if you've got the same thing happening on your drawing and you don't have smudge sticks, you can always use cotton buds or even just a little bit of tissue paper or something. Just make sure you give it a good smudge. Okay, now what I'm going to do, because I think that this edge is actually quite, that contrast is quite strong. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to really softly with my finger just go really softly all along the edge, but I'm going to do it in one direction. I'm not going to go in circles or anything like this, because I don't want to smudge this completely out of control, but just in one direction, really softly. And I'm also going to apply a little bit of brown color onto that shadow part, because now that the black and that a bit of that green is transferring onto the banana is getting a little bit too cool, that shadow area. So I'm going to add a bit of warm brown and do the same thing, and just going in one direction. Okay, if I start doing this, I'm going to blend the whole banana. So just in one direction. Okay, so it's starting to look more and more like the banana. Now I am going to use white, and I'm going to go over again some of the lighter areas. And see, that's what I mean. See how quickly it transfers, just because I've got sort of a darker color on my fingers, goes onto the white straight away, which is not a problem, because if you're working with this kind of material, you should kind of be prepared for that. So now I'm adding more shadows, because now I can compare how light I need to go. Like, I probably don't need to add any more white around here, because it's definitely light enough, but I think that we could do with a bit of white on this side. And a little bit up there as well. And that's what I mean, when you're working with soft pastels, it is like chalk, but I think in some ways they're even crumblier than actual chalk. So you have to, if you need to go softly, you really need to go softly. And again, I'm just going to use my brush and just really softly See, I don't even need to do anything to smudge, I just need to dab a little bit. I'll do the same thing. And a little bit here. And I'll grab a little bit of black on my brush and add it here. Okay. I'm almost not touching the paper, that's how gentle you have to be. Because we really don't want the black lines. We only want to show the shadow and the light. Just there as well. Okay, I think we're definitely getting there. Just a few last things. After applying that white, some of these markings are gone. Maybe some on the side, a bit more, and there as well. And I'm also going to use this. You can use just your soft pastel, but this would just have a bit more control. Going for some darker lines. Now I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and please don't forget to subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and check out my Patreon as well. I will also leave all the links to the other tutorials that I've been talking about during the video in the description box as well, so have a look over there if you're interested. Okay, so yeah, that's that. One more thing, just a really soft, just like I went feather light on that black on the line, we'll go feather light with the white. When you've got the dark and the light meeting together, you create that sort of a stronger 3D illusion. So that's why when you've got something light, it looks lighter when it gets really close to the shadow. It doesn't actually get lighter. This is how our eye receives it. Okay, now if you have been using this material with me, of course make sure you wash your hands, but sometimes it's still quite hard to get rid of complete, like you still might have some faint shadows on your fingers, so sometimes using things like baby wipes or makeup removal wipes, that helps as well. So that's how you can get the last bit of it out if you need your hands clean straight away. Otherwise, after a few more washes, it'll completely disappear. Okay, so I hope you had fun, and as I said before, remember to subscribe and press the notification bell as well, so that you're notified every time a new video comes out. And support me on Patreon if you can do that. That would be great. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial today, and as always, thank you so much for drawing with me, guys.
Just before you go, I wrote a little book that I would like to give to you. I call it The 7 Habits of Calm and Happy People. It includes exercises for really implementing all that stuff, a lot of resources for reading more about it, and some of my weird drawings too. At these difficult times we all struggle, so I decided to give it to my viewers for free. So go to findcalm.com/book, and I'm confident that you're going to find it valuable.